Welcome back again to our series on ancient Mesopotamia, an overview of the book by A. Leo Oppenheim, Portrait of a Dead Civilization. We are on to part 4, looking at the external influences of the areas surrounding ancient Mesopotamia. We're going to look at the Semitic influx that took place throughout the period of Mesopotamian history, patterns of trade that existed, and finally, Mesopotamian influence, this time going out to the surrounding regions. So there was, throughout the period of Mesopotamian history, a steady influx of Semitic people. They came from the north of Syria, and they had a tremendous impact on both the structure of Mesopotamian society, but also on interactions between those in urban and settled areas and those in the periphery. Some of the Semitic groups that came into Mesopotamia would settle in the more urban areas and take part in the general structure of those cities. However, many remained in the outlying areas, staying nomadic, living in encampments, and this type of tribal structure and organization showed resistance to paying taxes and corvée labor, providing that corvée labor. And in general, these encampments, these settlements in the outlying areas outside of the main urban centers, and generally speaking, these often were a source for unrest and revolt throughout Mesopotamian history. Trade is a fundamental part of Mesopotamian history. We see it going in all different directions. One primary source or direction of trade was with the Persian Gulf and the Indus Valley regions. There was a book that was recently published in the last couple of years, Babylonia, the Gulf region, and the Indus, Archaeological and Textual Evidence for Contact in the 3rd and early 2nd millennia BC by Stefan Larsen and Peter Steinkeller. It's published by Eisenbrons in the Mesopotamian Civilizations series. What you see there is trade. We can see it in the record as early as the 6th millennium, I think particularly beginning in the Ubaid period. And the interactions essentially are with 4 different regions that are mentioned in the Mesopotamian sources: Marhashi, Melucha, Dilmun or Tilmun, and Magan or Makan. And these are all described, of course, in the book, but these regions were a source of, often on to greater or lesser degrees, constant trade. And this continued down to the end of the 3rd millennium, from the aspect of the state. So state trade, state organized trade continued down to the end of the Ur III dynasty. And then after that, trade operated more on a private scale. So it continued, but it was no longer state run. The Old Assyrian period, however, in the beginning of the 2nd millennium, was characterized by private trade. So private merchants from the city of Ashur traded tin and textiles for silver with Anatolia. And a trading colony was established there, given its success. And from this trading colony, we have thousands of economic texts, letters, administrative and legal documents, and a variety of other genres. We have a video on this, a daily date on this, that explains it in more detail, so see the link in the description for that. In the second half of the 2nd millennium, we have another significant period of trade. This is international trade, but among the members of the ancient Near East in general. So this is international trade between the members of what we call the Great Powers Club. And this includes Egypt, up into Anatolia, Assyria, Babylonia, amongst others. And this type of trade had significant effects on the what we call Amarna period you see the description below. There's a link that connects you to our video on the Amarna period. Influence did not come only from the outside in. As a matter of fact, Mesopotamian influence from very early on affected the surrounding regions. I don't have it up on the screen, but you have the Uruk expansion very early on affects the northwest, affects the east. This is Mesopotamia affecting the surrounding region. Oppenheim describes 3 different areas that are affected by Mesopotamian influence: Elam to the east with its capital at Susa, Urartu to the north in the Lake Van region, and off to the northwest, the Hittites with its capital at Hattusha. All of these areas used the Mesopotamian writing system. There was scribal education in these areas that modeled to greater or lesser degrees after Mesopotamian style. The language and the literary tradition went, again, to varying degrees, but with that tradition brought the religious and social influence from Mesopotamia. So Mesopotamia not only was influenced by those around, but had an influence on the surrounding regions themselves. So in this case, influence was unidirectional. When it came to language and literary tradition, the influence went from Mesopotamia outward. So in summation, influence went both ways, both in and out of Mesopotamia. Semitic people groups came in and influenced the history and structure of Mesopotamia. Trade took different forms, but resulted in cross-cultural contacts and influence from all of these regions. And Mesopotamian language and literary influence was transmitted to the surrounding regions, having a significant effect. And we see this in biblical texts, we see this in literary traditions from the surrounding regions. Coming up tomorrow, we're going to begin to look at an introduction to Mesopotamian society. We're going to look at, over the next couple of lessons, palace and temple interaction and just general structure of society. So it should be an interesting continuation of the series. So stay with us. But until next time, resist poor scholarship. Always ask, how do you know that?